Hey guys, we are back. Episode 3 coming in, I should say part 3. Everything you need to know about long-term rentals with my boy Sam Poppell. We have just been going deep and diving deep into it. This has been amazing. I don't think yet we've had a 3-part series except for the GrowthCon review.
Right.
So which is something Sam actually just got back not too long ago. So that's something that we could definitely connect on and do again. I think would be a really fun kind of annualized episode. But yeah, let's dive right in it. So if you guys didn't catch part 1 and part 2, we're going over everything you need to know, the good, the bad, the ugly of long-term rentals, not only single family rentals, but multifamily rentals. Sam manages both. So he's extremely well-versed, more than a dozen properties. And with that being said, this is the part that I think everybody's most interested in: financial considerations of long-term rentals. What do you do?
Yeah. So a couple ways to go about it. I'm gonna start with the easiest one. I think the easiest way for everybody to get into real estate is to do the buy a house, live in it, and you either a house hack, so meaning that you buy the house, you live in one of the rooms, then you rent out all your other rooms, and then eventually you rent out your own room and replace yourself. Or and you've done that, Will. We talked about that on a previous episode. But
I actually did it originally by getting permission from the landlord. If you go back way back, it's like I was a broke college kid and I wanted to live somewhere a little bit nicer, but I didn't know how to. But I had a job in college, and I had pretty decent credit for how young I was. So I was able to get into some of these houses that were nicer than some of my other college roommates. And so, a lesson learned: I did not get deposits back, but ended up saving tons of money through college, and with that was able to buy a house. Right
yeah. So, like I said, then the way I did my very first one is I bought a condo in Destin, Florida, knowing that my long term I could use it as vacation rental. But knowing that I needed a place so I could move with my dogs, so that's why I got that one.
I do hate it for you that your first place you bought is a condo in Destin. I mean, I just feel bad for you.
Yeah, no, and that was definitely right place, right time. I was talking to the right girl who gave me the right information, and saw everything lined up for me to buy that first condo. But yeah, so for me, my first one was I moved in it. I lived in it for you're supposed to live for about a year. I lived in it for about 10 months before moving out and turning that into a rental. But I've done that several times. So I did that first with a condo that turned into a short-term rental. Then I did that with two single-family homes, and so that's been great. And I'm currently living in a single-family home that I plan on doing it again. So like I said, so that's the very easy way to do it. Again, I think I talked about in part 1 where once you move into the house, you know what your mortgage, taxes, and insurance is going to be every month. Usually, if you got a conventional loan, it's all rolled up into one payment. Once you know what that is, once you see rents going over that, that's when I start considering my next move. So that's when I start looking at, what do my finances look like in terms of, do I have enough money for another down payment and any kind of other move-in expenses that I would need. As soon as I have that money situated, that's when I would think about it. So that's a great way to do it. Like I said, when you're young, starting out, cash strap, and you need a place to live anyway, so you do it like that.
I think you mentioned something really, really cool as well that you had read was 15-year mortgages over 15 years and then just letting them rip.
Yeah. So like I said, I never did the mortgage route, but that was a book method I read. Now, if there's pros and cons to that. I like the idea of paying them off in 15 years. I would still want to get the 30-year mortgage. That we won't have to. Now, the argument to that is, if you get a 30-year mortgage, are you going to be disciplined enough to pay double payments every month to cut it down to 15? Or in actually case, if you pay double payments on 30, you'd cut it to like 7.5. But, I don't know, so but like I said, but if you do it on the 15, you're forced to, and that way you have it paid off. Now, you can still, with the lesson I took from that book was just buy a property every single year. I don't actually use the 15-year mortgage rule, but I just took that. You got to get a property every single year. And it's a great way to, like I said, stack up, because most of the people that I've talked to that are in their 60s that own 30, 40, or 50 properties, they didn't buy all those at once. It was, a slow process. I bought 1 this year, 2 the next year, 3 this year. I didn't buy any for a couple of years. Then I bought 5. That's usually how those stories go when you meet that landlord that has 50 plus. I mean, I've met someone one time that owned like 130 something different, single family homes around the Panama City area. And that's kind of like how his story was, that it just, he was just a steady landlord, kept buying stuff. And then eventually, had so many and got tired of dealing with it all and wanted to sell them all, Sure. And so, but like I said, the conventional loan method, conventional FHA, buying one every few years. The other way I like to do it, which is very popular on most podcasts, is the BRRRR method, which buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So, I got a couple of them that way, where I'd buy a property. One of my favorite ones I did was I bought a property for $180. I put $80,000 into it. So all in, I'm in it for $260. It comes back, it's worth $345. And so I do a cash out refi at 70% loan to value. I have most of my money back. I think there was a couple dollars left in the deal, but not many. And then I was able to rent it right away for $800 a month over what my taxes, mortgage, and insurance was. So cash flowed like a dream. I think my renting out for $2,800 a month, and my all-in expenses were just under $2,000 a month.
That's sick. So when you're breaking down something like that's a dream property, right?
Right.
But like when you're considering a property for investment, what are the key financial metrics that you're kind of like looking at and really, honing in to determine this is a yes, this is a no, and I've got to put all these yeses in a pile, but I'm going to have a lot more no's that don't make sense. And
yeah, I mean, I pretty much, just my eyeball math usually is like, if I look at a property and I don't see if I look at what the total home costs and I don't think that it would rent for between at least do a gross rent between 10 and 12% of that, I don't even look at it anymore. I just completely
break that down for some.
Yeah. So if a property was $200,000, if it wasn't renting for at least $20,000 a year, or around $1,800 a month, I wouldn't even look at it any further, because the cash flow isn't anywhere close enough. And then, like I said, I understand where I'm at personally. Like I personally am still buying for, this is where everyone is in real estate for a little bit different reasons. If you're you're in a high income in your main job, you might not be buying for cash flow. You might be buying more for appreciation because you're buying real estate to offset your taxes, your tax obligation. And so that makes more sense for you. So you can afford appreciation. Me, I make good money. I don't have like, tremendous, but I do well. But I like to have some cash flow still too, so I can't play it purely on appreciation. I need to see some cash flow. So I want to make sure that I got enough cash flow to cover all the bills. And then I want to make sure it kicks up enough surplus that I would be able to sit 60 days with it empty, and if it can do that, but usually most turns in between 10 and I like right now is actually I would say probably a little bit one of my rougher turns. I got the home back on the 20th of March. I should probably have it. It's today as we're recording this episode. It's April 9th. So I've had it back in my possession in about 19 days. My guys should be completely finished with it this week. And then so it should be ready for me to rent again next week. So we probably, like I said, by the time my guys are completely done with it, it took them 30 days to completely flip it. Now, like I said, this was a little bit rougher one. I had a king size bed left in every bedroom. There's 5-bedroom house, so I had a full bed. So I had to haul out. I had a full on, living room set, stuff in the kitchen, stuff left in the fridge, some things in the yard. So
what do those typically look like cost wise whenever you're having to kind of clean up?
So this one, I mean, like just the initial clean out was about $1,000 because like I needed a dumpster because again, if I didn't need the dumpster, I would have saved $500, but I needed the dumpster, so the dumpster cost me $500. That will vary a little bit depending on the market you're in. To get 2 guys that will pretty much do anything you need and work a full 8-hour day and bust their ass, that you're going to be paying them between probably $200, $250 a day, at least $20 an hour probably. So basically I had a guy that helped me out, so it was $500 to get 2 guys to come clear out the house, and so I was at $1,000 there. Then I had to get my cleaner come do a deep clean, and that was like I said, for the 5-bedroom house. I paid her $400 to do that, so I'm at $1,400. I do have some touch-up paint, some drywall, a little miscellaneous stuff. So, like I said, this was a rougher one. Most of them I won't have quite much, but all the other miscellaneous stuff will probably be another $2,500. So in total for this whole turnover, I will be out about $5,000. I will now. Granted, I get to keep the full security deposit. Full security deposit was $2,800.
Right.
So I'm at that point. I'm out about $2,200. My tenant though was there for 3 years. So when you stretch out that $2,200 over the 3 years, I'm still ahead. And so like I said, you got all that working for you. Again, that was a worse scenario though. I mean, I have a lot of ones where someone moves out, I send someone in to do a deep clean. Let's just say it's it's like one of my little 2-bed, 1-bath apartments, with a deep clean on that, it's like $250, and then it's ready to go again, and so, so like I said, they vary, the longer you have a tenant, and that's kind of, you asked me before about length of people staying. That's the pro and con of people staying. When they stay a long time, you can almost count on you're going to have to do a lot more just because normal wear and tear happens, like, I mean, if you have a family of, 5 living in your home, and they're, walking on the floor every day, and I mean, hanging pictures and stuff on the walls, there's going to be a little bit of wear and tear damage. So you would definitely, need to expect. I mean, I would expect to have to, you should probably expect to have to paint, I would say about every 5 years as a landlord, between 5, like if there's depending on move outs too. But I would say if you have a move out around your 5th year, you definitely have to do some touch up paint if you didn't have to do a full repaint. But like by 10 years, you can pretty much expect to have to do a full inside repaint. With mine, I do LVP in all my houses. So usually I don't have any floor issues. If I buy a house with carpet, I might run the first tenant with the carpet, and then second that tenant's out, rip all that out and put the LVP flooring in. Yeah, you need to try to bulletproof your units as much as possible.
A couple of examples. So flooring would be a good bulletproof example. What else?
Yeah, I mean, flooring's a good one.
Where are the biggest expenses when you have turnover going to? Like you gave a lot of expenses there, but that was more of a unique, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, most of the time when you have a simple one, it's just a matter of paying the cleaners and then going through and touching up a couple spots, and I mean,
okay.
I would say that's most of them, like most of them have been that way when they've happened. And then, like I think like my one house in Destin where the guy was talking about how he lived with me for 6 years, that one I went ahead and did a full update in his house after he moved out. But again, that was also me evaluating the rental market, knowing that, okay, if I go in and I change out and put quartz counters in and I update this bathroom, I can now raise the rent, $400 in this house.
Sure.
And that was a 1-bed, 1-bath. I knew that by me doing a couple things, I could increase the rent by $400 or $500. So that one made sense, and that's something you got to look at as a landlord, because again, you try to match the neighborhood as best you can. What I mean by that is, if you're in a neighborhood with butcher block counters, then there's no need for you to go quartz in your house. You can have butcher block.
Sure.
But once most of the neighborhood is upgraded to the nicer counters, well, then whenever you finally get that turnover point, for you to be able to get the market rent or the whatever the perfect rent is for that market, you're going to have to match the amenities inside or the finishes inside.
Totally.
And so that's when you would evaluate, like, well, I cannot do anything, and then I can, as long as I rent for under the market price, I'll get that. But at the same time, the risk you run with having the cheapest rental on the market, you might get the cheapest tenant. And that's a concern you got to have. So
sure.
I try never to be the cheapest landlord on the market, because I want to make sure, like I said, I have a slight quality in the in the tenant.
Right.
So yeah.
No, that makes sense. I think that when you're having to scope through all these things, right? Like, I'm a new investor, a lot of it's like really stressful. So the big one is financing, right?
Yeah. So I think I got sidetracked on that. So
no. I'm going to kind of pinpoint you here. So Can you walk us through? We were getting great, and it's not that you got sidetracked. You're just giving a ton of detail, giving examples, which I think is great.
And I was going into the next phase. So I was giving you entry phases. The next phase that I was going to tell you is either your entry once you run out of your conventional and FHA loans. Because don't quote me on that, but I believe you can only have about 10 of them in your personal name.
8 to 10. Yeah, it depends on how much equity and things.
Yeah. So once you run out of those, you're either you got to move on to something else, or you can't buy any more houses. So the next thing you can move on to is the DSCR loans, and this is also what you'll do once you eventually refinance some of those original conventional loans into longer term loan, because eventually, like me, for example, once I run out of my conventional and FHA loans, I'm eventually going to want to buy another personal house again to probably use conventional financing. So I'll need to take some of mine and refinance those properties into DSCR loans, which at that point, I would have probably held them for, over 5 years, because usually most DSCR loans have prepayment penalties that go up until 5 years.
Sure.
And so usually it's after 5 years.
Before you do that, can you tell us a little bit what a DSCR loan is and why we would have this prepayment penalty and what that penalty kind of looks like?
Yeah. So a DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. So basically, usually they want to be able to you to cover your debt service, by 1% or 1.5%. So meaning that if you're, all in monthly expenses on a property were $100, then, you need to make sure the property is bringing in at least $101 or something like that. Obviously scale that up because, most of it's, we're talking thousands. So that's, like I said, debt service coverage ratio. So the beauty of one of these loans is they don't take into your personal finances into account. They are looking solely at the property, making sure the property can cover the debt service, and so basically they'll send an appraiser out. The appraiser is going to make sure that that the rent will be more than what your debt service is. If it's not, then they'll lower the loan amount that they'll give you. So giving you an example, if you have a $300,000 property. And let me make it even easier. Let's just say it's $100,000 property. Yeah, $100,000 property, and they're going to give you a loan at 70% loan to value. So that means the bank will give you a loan for $70,000. Well, let's just say that the rents would not quite hit that coverage point. They might come back and be like, okay, it won't cover at 70%, but we can do the deal for you, but it would only be 60% loan to value. So that means you got to leave a little more equity in it, a little more skin in the game. But that way, the other reason they're doing that though too is they're making sure your cash flow will surpass the monthly payment. And so, it's in a way it's good for you because it helps protect you to make sure you don't get over your head. But then again, it's also, like I said, it's to make sure it's the right loan for that property. And so, like I said, that's a way you can either enter a property or you can refinance one of your previous properties into one of those loans, and that way you'll be able to go back and use the conventional loan again. But those loans are great, like I said, for building a real estate portfolio. They often are to your LLC, and so they don't fall on your personal credit report. So that's a huge benefit. It's like, I think I have about 5 of those. So between the 5, I think I owe around $1 million, in debt on those. And that $1 million in debt does not show up on my personal credit report. That debt is to my LLCs. Granted, if I don't pay that, they won't necessarily come out of me, but they will take those properties.
Sure.
And so that's, like I said, that's the great. So it's basically a commercial real estate loan, but for a smaller individual property. And when I say smaller, it's usually because I'm talking the single families I'm buying are, in the 250 to 350 range.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying you couldn't use a DSCR on a $1 million property, but like I said, different banks have different loan limits, on those.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think that's really good. So like for you, Sam, as a well-versed investor for long-term rentals and property manager, you're really kind of using traditional loans where you see fit, but getting into these more creative financing opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about, you just got to see what makes sense. I mean,
So it kind of goes into your long-term strategy, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I have, a couple of conventional loans that I had to put very little down on. I mean, I think the house I'm sitting right now, I only put 5% down on. And I'm currently looking at.
I love that play. I like getting back at the closing table.
Yeah. You got some great stories on closing club. But yeah, like I said, I didn't get any kind of like special rebates. I got a traditional conventional loan for this house, put 5% down, and already I'm seeing my all-in mortgage, taxes, insurance is like $20,000 change every month. I just saw 2 houses in my neighborhood, one rent for $2,200 and one rent for $2,400. Same floor plan I have. So that was let me know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that I have some safety and security if I want to move. So if I have my next house picked out and I have my down payment ready and I have my moving money ready, there's no reason I couldn't be out of here and have this place rented in the next month. And that's, like I said, my long-term plan of knowing that, I'm trying to, build up and have, I mean, like it's going back to that, house a year for 15 years. I mean, you could stretch it out. I consider myself a young guy at 35. I could do a house a year for the next 30 years, because I mean, I take great care of myself and eat healthy at Clean Eats. So, I'll still be a youthful 65-year-old and have
big
a ton
of Clean Eats. Big shout out to Clean Eats.
Exactly.
Always letting us not only live longer, eat healthy, but have a great podcast. Let's go.
But yeah, so like I said, for me, my long-term plan is just to keep acquiring real estate because, the more real estate you buy, the more you have that appreciates, the more your wealth goes up. Because for me, this is all just, a long-term wealth play, and so, like I said, so that's why I like buying that. And yeah, again, with any kind of real estate, you just got to run your numbers. And so when you buy single family homes, I just feel like you have a ton of lending options because you can run the play as an individual, going conventional or FHA. Then you can run it through your LLC, looking at it, doing a DSCR loan, and then you can, like I said, you got, just have some options with that. And versus when you go to multifamily, you really only have, you have the big traditional debt. And then, I mean, every bank you call might have a different kind of loan the individual bank can give you, but I mean that's a tedious calling process. Like you're literally calling up First Bank of
of whatever
city, hey guys, I'm looking at this, and seeing what they can create for you. So that's not like a given deal, but it's like I said, when you buy a single family home, right off the top, you just have a ton of loan options that, and where you can play it commercial or you can play it personal purchase and then make it make sense, for you. And that to me is one of the biggest advantages. I think the reason I would say I love single family homes, I'm not saying more than I would love a multifamily project, but just like the advantages to it is multiple lending options and more personalized control. I think being able to control the deal and not have to and be able to like make decisions for yourself, not have to compromise with others. There's just a lot of benefits to that. Not saying that you can't be in the right deal and make a lot of money, but you can go read the news right now, especially in Texas, especially in Austin. There's a whole lot of syndication deals going bust over there. And that's kind of where I go into that. You're required to trust someone to make the right decisions when you're joining someone else's syndication. And again, there's many great syndication operators out there. We've had a few of them on our show that I would definitely invest in their syndications. But again, you're trusting someone else, and with that, their win or their loss is your win or loss. And, I think there's just something, I have a personal security feeling knowing that I'm in control of the situation, because majority of the time where I've been in control of the money's gone up. Majority of the time where I've given up control because I trusted someone else, it's about 50-50 whether I've made money or lost money, so, and so I as you get older, you tend to not want to repeat the same mistakes. So I now know that I like to be as much control of the financial decisions as possible with whatever I'm involved in.
Oh yeah, no, you have to. I think that's critical there. But if I was curious now, knowing all of this knowledge, how to get in, what about building the long-term strategy and exit plans? Like, what are some things that you're considering? And do you have specific exit strategies for specific homes or overall exit strategies for the entire portfolio? And then what does that kind of look like for single family versus multifamily? And do you just 100% know that you're going to hold them for the long haul, or when do you decide to sell if you need to?
Yeah. So, I have a few homes that when I originally bought them, I had planned on, I'm just going to hold these forever, and just, refinance, ever so often when I need to. As I've gotten a little older, and as I'm getting into other types of real estate, I have considered selling a 1031 of those. And I think, like I said, it all just falls to an individual story, So, for me, if if you and I take our next phase after we get done building single family rentals, because I know we plan on doing some build to rent in the next couple of years, and so. But after that, we might get into building industrial flex space or storage units.
Yeah.
So there might be a certain point where I find another love I love so much that then I'd want to free up some of that capital and move it over. But, but for me, I can only move it over when I know it can be performing better, And so if my current investment is performing so well, then maybe I'll just stay diversified, because like me owning a single family home and me owning a storage unit or industrial flex, they might both be in the real estate category, but that is still great diversification because they are two still totally different asset classes within the real estate asset category, focusing on two totally different needs and markets. People are always going to need homes. So that's one of the reasons why I love rentals, period, whether it be multifamily or single family rentals, is because on Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, shelter is the first one. So we all need a home, and so that's something why it's always very secure. But at the same time, like I talked about earlier, there's regulations as a landlord. You got to take care of certain things, and you also do have more times where people call you for problems. That's one of the beauty about storage unit, or is you don't have any broken toilets in a storage unit. You don't have anyone calling you. There's problems. And then the eviction process in storage units is really easy. Someone doesn't pay you, you throw another lock on their unit and it becomes your unit. And so, after the notice is over and they don't come and pay and make it right. So, so for me, the exit would either, my houses that are spread out, that I have, those ones would probably be, if something better came along, I'll either 1031 or sell to me that opportunity. But they're in great locations though too. So all those would be great long-term holds. If you and I, because I know one of our goals is to build a whole neighborhood together for build to rent. Mm-hmm. That one, that could be a lifetime hold. But again, if the money is right, if the right hedge funds trying to, buy out our whole neighborhood for the right price, I'm not gonna say that there's never a price I would sell for. Sure. There's definitely a number. It's so, but for me, like I said, it's all about making comparisons and knowing that I'm doing the best. I'm making the best decision with that money at the time. And then, and right now I'm making all these decisions, for myself, as an individual, or you and me are making the decisions together for our company. In a later phase, we might be running our own fund or our REIT, and in that case, we'll be making decisions, for many people. And in that case, it's always about making sure that people are getting the highest returns that they can be getting, because that'll be my obligation. So I kind of keep knowing that that's kind of my long-term goals of wanting to create a real estate fund where I can help others build wealth. I'm practicing now in my own, because, if I can't generate, profits year over year with my own money, I have no business ever managing anyone else's. So
I completely agree.
But if I can show you how I've doubled my own wealth in real estate, I've doubled it every 3 to 4 years, and I can do that repeatedly, for 10 or 15 years. Now all of a sudden, it's worth investing in my fund. So
yeah, 100%. So, right. Dang, man, this has been invaluable advice. Anyone that's starting out in single family rentals or trying to decide maybe I should house hack and get multifamily, what's some advice that you'd give to them, and maybe highlight some of those mistakes that you made outside of the ones you've already mentioned that they could avoid?
Yeah. No, I mean, probably the biggest, going on the mistake thing first, the biggest thing is, like I said, just make sure you're really interviewing your tenants. And then, have everything in place, and make sure, you have your copy of your lease, you're keeping track of all that. You're having, your first month deposit. I like to do first month deposit, last month deposit, and first month rent, last month rent, and security deposit. So, having all that up front, that way you're prepared for things to go wrong. That's very important, because if you do all that, generally you can head off a lot of problems. If you're holding someone's last month rent, generally they fix late times of being late and make it all right. And generally they also don't destroy your place. So I recommend all that. As far as advice to give someone starting out today, I would say, take action. If you live in a spot where it's very hard to find a place to rent, then you live in a perfect area to house hack. I mean, and that's really the tell sign. Like, if you're a person by yourself, if you can't afford to go rent a place by yourself, there's other people in your area that have that same problem. So I would say that you should find an area where the bedrooms and bathrooms make sense as far as in a shared living situation, where you'd have the right number of bedrooms, the bathrooms for people to be able to share and live harmoniously together. And then I would take that as my first approach, is just save money down for that down payment. Maybe a first step even for that is you talk to a lender and get pre-qualified. So that way,
I think that's a good spot.
Yeah, that's probably the very first starting place, because that way you know what you have to work with. You can see what you qualify for. You can figure out what the monthly total cost will be, and then you can reverse engineer that. So you know that, okay, if every single month, the total for this house I'm looking at is going to be $2,100 for after taxes, mortgage, and insurance. $2,100. It's 3 bedrooms, so that'd be an average of $700 a bedroom. The utilities for this house is going to be an average of $300 a month. So everyone's all in for $2,400 total. So if I rent out each of these bedrooms at $1,000 each for the 2 bedrooms, then all I got to do is pay the $800. So I save this much, which then helps you get to the next one. And then you also know that you can then turn around and rent your 1 bedroom that you have left for another $1,000, and you're making money. And so, like I said, I would just take the first step to figure out what the math would be to move into a place. And that's the step, really, if you're starting off, if you're still working another job and you're really scrapping. You might be where you're starting to make a little bit of money on your own, and that's the case where that you go ahead and look at putting a down payment on a place to live in it for a year, and then plan to move on. And then one other piece of advice I just remembered too, another caveat is that a lot of people when they go get pre-qualified, and I was kind of in this boat that I was originally qualified to buy something nice, a little bit nicer than what I got. But if you go, so let's just say that if I was qualified to buy a home up to $500,000, well, if I go buy that $500,000 home, my debt to income ratio will not allow me to go buy another property for another couple of years, or else I got to significantly increase my income. And so I might, if I was qualified,
that's where a lot of people make critical mistakes.
Right. So if I was pre-qualified for 500, I would put my cap at 300, buy that more starter home versus like a little bit nicer, mid-level home. And then that way I can be qualified to buy another $300,000 home the next year. And it's easier to keep on. And so I did that knowing I was living a little bit below my means, but I was building this rental portfolio. So like I said, just those are probably the things I'd focus on. Is if I was starting out today, is go get pre-qualified, run some numbers, and then like I said, just make sure the math works for you, that you're going to be able to get the right house with the right numbers, and then exit. And then don't overspend on your first home. The dream home I want is going to be, a beautiful waterfront home, and I'm not going to get into it tomorrow. And most people won't get into their dream home, within their first home or even second home, unless you come from substantial financial means. So if you're starting out like most of us, and you're trying to build your fortune from the ground up, you got to, like I said, think about things as far as what I need to maybe possibly sacrifice a little bit today so I can have more of tomorrow. And so that's where I did in my home buying, is that I sacrificed buying the nicest house I could to get a house that'd be a great rental home, where the amount of money I had purchased it versus the amount of money I could rent it for had a perfect ratio. Again, I love the 1% rule, where whatever you have all into the property, you get 1% of that a month, which is a 12% annual return. If you paid cash for the home, it winds up being a 30-something% return after you finance it. So like I said, that's what I would do to start off, is, like I said, find a home, get underwritten, and find a home where the numbers work. So you just gotta do some math, but this is a great way where someone can get started ASAP and not have to do a whole lot, because it's really easy to understand. Once you can see what your monthly costs are, what you got to rent it for, and it's pretty easy to understand that.
Yeah, dude. No, I think this is all super important, because a lot of people just go max out that whatever they get approved for, and I think that's where it really, you have to sit down with yourself, maybe with your family, and understand, like, what's the goal? Do you want to have a couple rentals? Because if you max your
Well, I don't want to pick anyone, but especially some of my friends that are ladies, that they've saved up and they have like an image of a home they want, so they go buy that one. But then again, they're now maxed out on that debt to income ratio. They can't go buy anymore, and so they live in a nice house, but then all the work they do has to do to go back to that house versus. The way I set mine up was, by me buying below my means and being able to get the right renters in, I've been able to stack those renters and stack those houses. And, now I have net worth in the multiple seven figures, and it's mostly being paid for by my tenants.
Yeah. And you and I, we both do, relatively well.
Mm-hmm.
And we both don't live in anything crazy, right?
Right.
But in the same time of us knowing each other, we've gotten multiple properties with each other and independently,
Right.
So it would be great, just like you said, to go to Pensacola Beach, go to Destin, and or be on the bay and live on the water. But then there's no way all the work that we'd be doing would be going back to pay.
Right. And don't get wrong. I think both you and I will have our dream homes in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely plan on living in a waterfront home one day. But once you see me in that waterfront home, know that I have enough cash flow coming in that my cash flow is paying for that home. I'm not having to go to work every day to pay for it. I already have enough cash flow coming in, and that's how I want to set my life up. Because for me, when I want to build wealth, the whole thing for me is I want to build a lifestyle that I can never lose. And so if I'm upgrading my lifestyle with the money I'm making while I'm working an active career, if for any reason my active career income goes, so does that lifestyle. But if I'm building my lifestyle based on my passive income, well, then anything can happen to me and I ain't going anywhere because my lifestyle will stay exactly the same because my passive income is what pays for it. And that's what people need to differentiate between their active income and their passive income, because, the doctor or lawyer who's upgrading their lifestyle based on their income, if they get hurt or injured or something happens, they can't maintain that lifestyle anymore. They'll lose everything of where they're currently at. But if that same person is investing constantly and then using their investments to pay for that lifestyle, well, like I said, their lifestyle is indestructible at that point. And I think that's what I want for myself, and that's what I want for everyone listening. Is I want everyone listening to be able to create an indestructible lifestyle. And so that comes with stacking assets, that cash flow, and putting them in the right order to prioritize your assets and your cash flow first, and put that over buying luxuries. Because if you buy your luxuries with your cash flow, you can buy luxuries nonstop, and that's what the goal is. But if you start buying luxuries with your income, well, now you're taking that money away from that your future assets and your future cash flow.
Totally. Man, this has been a lot of fun. I learned so much. We got 3 episodes. This is amazing. Where can everybody find you?
Yeah, man. So you can find us at theeliterealestatepodcast.com. Please check out our website. Also, check us out on the Elite Real Estate Podcast on YouTube. We're really trying to build up our YouTube subscribers. It would really help us out if you share our YouTube link with some friends and tell them to follow us and subscribe. And then if you want to talk to me personally, easiest and quickest way to talk to me is my Instagram at Sam_FloridaMan. So just shoot me a DM there. Love talking real estate and finance. I also own the Clean Eats restaurants in Northwest Florida and Mobile, Alabama. So I'd love for you guys to come by and see me there. But check us out, the EliteRealEstatePodcast.com. And we've been dropping it on every episode. I definitely want to drop it on this one. My virtual assistant that I have is amazing. And we now have a virtual assistant service. So these guys can help you with social media. They are trained cold callers. They have no accent, very easy to understand, and they are trained in real estate cold calling. This will help everybody who's already in real estate. You're not going to have to spend a whole lot of time doing a lot of deep training. Just have to show them kind of how you run your things. But like I said, they already have experience calling customers. So go to virtualcallers.net, and to save money, use the code Elite Real Estate. The Elite Real Estate code will save you guys money on that. But again, I personally use this service. I have my virtual assistant shooting out at least 400 direct messages a day for my restaurants, and he is knocking that out of the park. So definitely recommend it. Virtualcallers.net, Elite Real Estate is the code. And then check us out, the EliteRealEstatePodcast.com. Will, did I leave anything out?
Dude, no, it's been a journey. It's been amazing. I appreciate your time and all your expertise, man. Really exciting. So
great episode. So guys, we appreciate you listening to us this week, and we can't wait to see y'all next week on the Elite Real Estate Podcast. So thank you for listening.
See you guys.